Okay, hello YouTube. Today I want to talk about finding traps in the main lines of openings. And the focus of today's video is going to be this line that I see happen all the time in club level play and scholastic play. It's the Italian game. It begins with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. And we're going to be taking a look at the two knights defense, beginning with this move knight to f6. And we're just going to be talking about how we can play a trappy variation, but also play like not a crazy wild gambit where if our opponent plays everything correctly, we still lose the game because our assessment is like minus 12 on the engine or something ridiculous. We want to play from a position of strength. We want to play from at least an equal position, or preferably a slightly better position, but still give our opponent a lot of ways to go wrong. Now, what's interesting in here is the main lines of this opening lends itself to that type of play really, really well. The main line is the knight attack line, beginning with knight to g5, threatening knight f7. And already, like on the amateur level, like a ton of games have just ended with h6, knight f7, forking queen and rook. Like if we look at the database, this position has occurred like over 160,000 times. You know, people have lost to this. I guess it says 215,294 times this position has been seen on the board on the Lichess database anyway. That's a crazy number of people to just fall for a basic knight fork. Okay, so that's already incentive to just play this opening, is people can just fall for the knight fork, especially at the scholastic level. But another huge incentive to play this is after d5, e takes d5, and then say knight takes d5, we can play the so-called fried liver attack, beginning with knight f7, king f7, queen f3 check. Now you can see already, like if we take a look at the eval bar is saying this is already slight edge white. And black is supposed to bring his king to the middle, and white's supposed to have a blistering attack in exchange for his piece. Okay, so you're getting a fun, attacking, aggressive position where, according to the engine, you have an advantage. And you also have the prospect of potentially winning the game very, very quickly, because a ton of people, over 1 million people, are retreating the king and losing. They're playing king e8, and then after bishop d5, over 275,000 people on Lichess have played the move knight to d4 because they saw that their knight was double attacked. They've played the move knight to d4 and lost instantly to mate in 1 with queen f7. So to me, already, we have a lot of incentive to just play the main line, to play knight g5, play against this two knights defense, and play the main line, because we have this potential to get these early checkmates. But let's go back. Okay, what if they don't fall for any of these early checkmates and they play the main line more correctly? So what if they play knight a5? We can, of course, play the Polero check line, bishop b5, c6, dc6, bc6. Now, something kind of interesting here. The three main moves in this position are bishop d3, bishop e2, and queen f3. The computer's top pick, if I just leave the engine run kind of on a low depth, is actually queen f3. But also queen f3 is like, it's the trickiest move in the position. It's the trickiest move. It's the trappiest move. It's the move that has the most potential for people to lose the game relatively quickly. Right? If we play queen f3 in this position, and by the way, all three moves should lead to some sort of slight edge white, but queen f3 is still supposed to be slight edge white according to theory. This is called the Bogozhubov variation. Okay, so we play queen f3. A lot of games have actually ended with knight d5. I have over 4,139 games ended with knight d5, queen f7 mate. People just walking into this mate, not realizing that their knight was pinned, but noticing that there was a double attack on c6. And so they block the double attack on c6 with knight d5, and they fall right into queen f7, just face first. They just face plant right into it. And they've got two moves to face plant into it as well, so that they could face plant into it next move as well. But this isn't the only trap. If they play something else, there's other traps. So like bishop b7, bishop a4 is the best move according to theory. h6 gets played, knight e4, and I've actually had a lot of games go knight d5 here, which, believe it or not, is a mistake. And actually, already, bishop b7 is kind of a mistake. Like bishop b7, bishop a4, the eval bar is already giving plus 1.3 for white, so you're already playing from a position of pretty extreme strength. But if they play knight to d5, you're nearly winning after just developing your knight. The point is we're threatening knight takes d5 followed by knight f6 check. And if you missed that threat, don't worry. 689 people also missed that threat. Actually, the highest percentage of people that played this position, the top move that got played in this position on the Lichess database, was people that missed the threat of knight d5. They just developed. They played bishop e7. And now just knight takes d5 wins a whole piece. They have to castle. The majority of people don't castle. The majority of people take it. And then we have knight f6 check, which forks the king and queen and wins the queen. The point is, if you move the king, you take the queen with the knight, winning the whole queen. And if you take the knight, you take the queen with the queen, and they can't capture back because that pawn is pinned. So now you're simply up a whole queen, and you're winning the game very, very easily. So again, people, they're like, oh, yeah, there's a couple traps, but what if they play the main line and they play it close to perfectly? There's traps in the main line, even if they play the main line perfectly. So if they play, instead of, knight d5 falling for mate in 1, if they play just bishop e7, the main line, we can play bishop d3. If they castle, we can play knight c3. Now, I'll note that I've had a lot of people play knight d5 here, and you get a pretty close to game over attack after bishop h7 and then h4. It's supposed to be pretty close to game over. This is just decisive advantage white by a pretty wide margin. So that's something that gets played as well. But a lot of people do play h6, and then after knight to e4, they play knight to d5. Okay, now the best move according to theory is you got to play knight to g3 because black was threatening to play f5 followed by e4. So now black has these two moves. He can play knight to b4 and knight to f4. Now if he plays knight to b4, it's just supposed to be pretty close to equal after knight f5, but white's supposed to be okay. It's supposed to be equal or possibly even just a slight edge white. So you're, again, playing from a position of strength. Knight b4, knight f5, you're doing pretty good here with the white pieces. You've still got your extra pawn, you've got a lot of space, you've got a pretty good position. A lot of people will play the move knight f4 here, which is actually a mistake. Actually, knight f4 is the most common move in the Lichess database. And after knight f4, bishop f5 is a big advantage for white. Like, we're already up to slight edge white, like plus 0.6. But after just one more mistake, after, say, bishop a6, trying to cut the king off from castling, now we're up to major advantage white after just playing d3, a developing move that threatens to capture the knight. Now, when this knight retreats, like knight to d5, we're starting to get a huge advantage because we're starting to get a huge preponderance of pieces that are going up against this black king. We can actually start moving our pieces towards that king immediately. We can play a move like knight to e4, or we can castle first, safeguard our king, wait for one more move, and then play knight e4, and start bringing our pieces into this king side. And this is what's so scary about this. We're threatening to win this game nearly on the spot in so many different scenarios. So if we just start going through the computer's so-called top line, or if we just make one more passive move with black, like maybe he tries to bring this knight back or something like that, we can just start building up our attack. We can play c4, taking this knight, knight to f4, and now the computer wants to play b3, offering up this pawn on the d3 square. So now if queen takes pawn, we have this cute check. So again, another trap, super trappy position. The king is under danger. They can't get away with either capture. This knight capture as well has problems. We could just play rook d1 and just pick up this knight. The computer actually wants to sacrifice the queen. So how would they defend here? The computer wants to play knight d6, right? And now the engine just wants to play d4, just taking advantage of the fact that this knight is loose. It wants to play knight back to g6, and it wants to play d takes e5. It wants to play knight takes e5, and then it wants to play queen to c3, and we're lining stuff up against this. So what if we just play, again, like the most natural looking move? Like, how could these games potentially end, just so you can kind of see these ideas? Knight d7, bishop f4, and I'm going to play a pretty human move here just so you can kind of see. Like knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bringing everything in. We got everything lining up. Knight to f6, rook a d1, focusing energy on this queen. We're going to have queen b6, and now bishop h6 would be breaking through. So the whole point would be something like g takes h6, knight f6, bishop f6, queen f6, and then just the threat is just rook lifting. We're just going to play something like rook d3 to g3 or something else. Actually, that's why the computer wants to play like c5 right now or bishop c8. Just trying to get rid of some of these pieces, because if you play any passive move, then we have queen h6 threatens mate in 1, and then if we block it with like rook d8, we have queen h7, king f8, queen h8, king e7, rook e1 check, and they have to block with the queen. Queen e3, rook e3 would be mate. So something like that. But basically the king side attack is getting so strong at that point, you basically have a winning advantage over on the king side. So you're pushing all of your pieces over to the king side, and then it's basically over. And that's within the main lines of the position. You're getting these huge advantages, huge potential to fall for traps, huge potential to lay more traps and make your opponent fall for more traps. And, I mean, there's just really no reason not to play the main lines of these positions and get positions like this where you can play for these, cute little traps, over and over and over again, and hopefully your opponent will fall for one of them. But if they don't fall for one of them, you could end up in a position like this where you just get a blistering attack with the white pieces and you still win the game. So that's the thing. You're playing from a position of strength. You're playing for these traps, but you're playing from a position where your position should be slight edge white at the very least. At the very worst, equality is what you're playing for with the white pieces, and you have that no matter what. So anyways, that's my recommendation for kind of the way that you should be playing against the Two Knights defense and the way that you should be playing for traps at the club level and at the scholastic level. And these variations are even played at the highest levels as well. And they are totally fine and they are totally sound. If your opponent knows this theory, you don't have to resign. Okay, so anyways, hope you found this video helpful. Hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. If you like videos like this, please hit that subscribe button, click on your notification icon. Thank you very much for watching.